Hi there. Let's talk motivated reasonings in relationships. This is a tribute to Ziva Kunda, and this is lecture at 4.5. So we're moving right along. The course is getting damn near completed when you think about it. So let us recall then that Ziva Kunda challenged social psychologists to create and test hypotheses that would definitely demonstrate motivation. And her challenge was met by several researchers in the time. So her article came like 91, and then Pete Ditto at University of California, Irvine, published 2 studies that looked very specifically at motivation and demonstrated results that couldn't be explained really by anything other than the concept of motivation being varied as high or low. And I was fortunate because when I was at UCI, my undergraduate advisor was Dr. Ditto, and so I got a good dose of motivated reasoning. Motivated skepticism is another term that he coined, and that's kind of what got me to Ohio State and into Phil Tetlock's lab, because he wanted someone who was kind of trained in motivation. So that's kind of how that works, right? Let's apply motivated reasoning to attributions in relationships. And I wanted to go to graduate school either to study teams, and that didn't pan out because there's so few doing it. And so I wanted to study motivated attributions in relationships, and I went to SUNY Buffalo, the State University of New York in Buffalo, where Sandra Murray, Frank Fitcham, Brett Pelham were all working, and they did this kind of work. And I almost ended up going there, but Tetlock was pretty persuasive, and that's how I ended up at Ohio State. But I have a real fondness for understanding how people explain the causes of their partner's behavior. Anyway, we'll talk about that throughout this lecture. So the case for motivated reasoning, this is Kunda's seminal article, 1990, Psych Bull. And Psych Bulletin is where a lot of longer articles get published for especially social psychology, right? And Kunda died in her 40s of brain cancer, and it was a serious loss to all of us. Let's talk, let me just read you a little bit of the abstract here. It's proposed that motivation may affect reasoning through reliance on a biased set of cognitive processes. And we talked about those in an earlier lecture when we were talking attributional errors. That's one style of these biased processes. Strategies, and notice, she's calling it strategies, not necessarily errors, right, for accessing, constructing, and evaluating beliefs. The motivation to be accurate enhances the use of the beliefs and strategies that are considered most appropriate, whereas the motivation to arrive at a particular conclusion enhances uses of those that are considered to be more likely to yield the desired conclusion. So Kunda's saying that right up front. Hey, cognitive psychologists, yes, the accuracy motive exists, and the intuitive scientist, right, and the intuitive economist are represented there. But sometimes people don't necessarily want to be accurate. Sometimes they want to reach a conclusion that they prefer, right, that they want to get to this preferred conclusion. So she goes on to say there's considerable evidence that people are more likely to arrive at conclusions they want to arrive at, but, and this is a big caveat, right, their ability to do so is constrained by their ability to construct seemingly reasonable justifications. So you can't, just make up fairy tales, although, my God, if you look in social media, it looks like a lot of people are willing to engage in fairy tale kind of thinking, but there are reality constraints for the most part. So let's talk then about the goal guides, perception and reasoning, this concept. And I want to apply this to relationships, so we're kind of mashing it up here. We're coming from a couple different angles to get to this point. And here's some questions that I think are fundamental to understanding and assessing causality within relationships. What is a person's goal for the relationship? And this is all important. And at the most basic level, does one want the relationship to continue or to end? Because if I want the relationship to continue, then I'm probably going to seek out information that supports continuation of the relationship. But if I want the relationship to end, then I'm going to be more sensitive, right? And I'm going to remember better information that allows me to justify ending the relationship. So it's strange that when we meet someone new, and we want this relationship to go forward, we kind of focus on all the positive aspects that are occurring. But But if the relationship's gone on for a while and we're seeing less and less future in it, then we may start to focus on the negative aspects. Notice, this is just a cognitive strategy to support where we want to go. It's straight up motivating reasoning within a relationship context, right? So, at a more subtle level, right, we can look at this in the nature of the relationship and how we construct a relationship. And in this case, back in the 70s, there was this concept, transactional analysis, and a book came out called I'm Okay, You're Okay, and this was kind of a popular press psychology book, very popular book, right, bestseller. And they describe this idea of being a one-up or a one-down, right, within a relationship. So this is kind of a more subtle within relationship kind of perspective. Do I want to be the one who's kind of like calling the shots, the one in charge, the good one, or do I want to be the one who kind of messes up, right, and needs to be corrected all the time? And we learn that we can be comfortable in one or the other for many of us. So perhaps one is looking to maintain the one-up position, then you need to find faults, right? And perhaps one's looking to keep it platonic rather than romantic, and this is another kind of subtle difference. That is, then I look at the person not as an object necessarily of desire or sexual desire if I want to keep it platonic, but if I do want to inject the passion or romantic aspect, then I view the person differently in that regard. And it's interesting when there's a mismatch there between platonic and romantic, which maybe some of you have encountered, is something that necessarily needs to be resolved. And it usually, if there's not agreement, it's going to spell out the end of the relationship sooner or later, in most cases. Well, let's take a look at the more basic level. I want the relationship to end. Right? I see no future in this relationship. That's my point of view. That's kind of my desired end point. I'm moving this relationship towards the exit door. But then, damn if my partner doesn't bring me flowers. Well, we generally consider that an act of kindness. But let me ask you this. Can you flip it around? Can you explain being brought flowers in a way that supports your desire to leave the relationship? Can you somehow use the flowers to discredit this partner? Well, you know, you're driven to explain their behavior. Hyder said that. To what should I attribute my partner's behavior? Well, if I want the relationship to end, what can I do? Hey, they brought me flowers. Well, we know what that means. Bring me flowers out of the blue, they must be cheating on me. Bastard. And now it enhances the story, the narrative of leaving this relationship as the correct thing to do. So, and notice that this is likely going to be a situational attribution. Oh, I understand. Yeah, my husband brought me flowers probably because his secretary got flowers given to her and he stole them off her desk on the way out the door. Or they're trying to manipulate me into staying in the relationship when they know I don't want to. So we can kind of create all these situational explanations. Note that they're all in the service of preventing that person from getting credit for what should be or could be or typically would be viewed as an act of kindness. So we can turn a gift of flowers into a threat, into a manipulation, into something negative. It's that simple. That's how good we are. Notice how good, how well we think and how flexible we are. Now let's suppose I want the relationship to continue. All right? I see a bright future for this relationship, like this flower. You like zinnias? I love zinnias. I grow zinnias every year. Butterflies like zinnias, bees like zinnias, and I love to photograph zinnias. So anyway, I see a bright future for this relationship. My partner brings me flowers. What should I attribute my partner's behavior? Remember Hyder, right? Well, it's likely to be a dispositional attribution. Oh my God, they brought me flowers. They're so sweet. This is the nicest person, and I want to stay with them forever. And notice, this is just one more piece of evidence that I've made the right choice, and this is the person for me, right? So it allows them to receive credit for the relationship, and it supports a narrative of continuation of the relationship. Well, what can we do? Hey. Well, be mindful of our motives and our desired reasoning outcome. So we engage in motivated reasoning. Kunda made the case. A lot of researchers have made it. So just recognize that we might be doing it. How am I framing this as good or bad, and how is that consistent with the end conclusion that I want to achieve, right? The end state that I want to achieve. And there can be some signals. If we find ourselves being overly harsh, right, or overly forgiving, then what is the motivation for doing so, right? And often when we're making extreme judgments or excusing extreme behavior, we might be engaging in this. And two questions emerge then when we're engaging in relationships then. And I think the first question is pretty simple. Am I being fair? And notice fair can be that I'm giving positive credit fairly, or I'm giving negative credit fairly. Am I fairly analyzing the inputs, right, as part of my conclusion? So that's one question we can always ask ourselves. And if I'm not being fair, then why not, right? What is my motive behind this? What could be the what's so, popular 70s term, what's so, right? So finally, virtually all the attributional errors that we've discussed can pop up in our reasoning of our evaluation and our evaluation of our relationships, right? And notice that the discussion board 7 can touch on this lecturette to a certain extent. It's not centrally focused on it, but I just like to do the mashup because I know how important relationships are to us, and I understand how flexible our cognitions can be. Can we understand, can we detect the difference between an error, right, and a motivated bias in our reasoning? And I think it makes us more mindful in our relationships, and ultimately makes us a better partner and allows us to have more successful relationships, or dare I say it, not continue relationships that aren't really necessarily good for us, healthy, or what we're seeking out of life, right? So, Penelope and I are going to say later to you guys, and I hope you have a great day.